Okay, let's begin class. We'll start with a reading quiz. So as you're filtering in, there's the session ID in the channel. The very first question for the reading quiz today says, which of the following is true about the horseshoe crab? A, its blood is light blue due to the manganese involved in oxygen storage. B, it is fished and mostly eaten by humans. C, its blood contains chemicals which immobilize pathogens. Or D, there are no synthetic chemicals that provide similar value as the horseshoe crab. So which of the following is a true statement?
One inch is correct, and then one inch has to be monster. At this point, I just don't know what to expect. It's just inconsistent.
It's out of control. I blame my TAs who write these. That is copy and paste them. Okay, answers in. I think there's just fewer people here today.
Wait, hold on. Sorry.
Okay, give it just another second here. Okay, while we're getting answers in, let me talk about the extra credit homework real quick. Again, so this will be for up to 10 points extra credit if you get the correct answer. If you get the incorrect answer, or rather, so here's how it's going to work. We're going to have multiple people do the same commodity at the same year. We're going to compare those, right? And if there's some discrepancies, Brennan's going to go through and double check them. And if they're not correct, we won't give you a full point. So double check it. If you want to double check that you've done it right, you can always send Brennan an email. He's going to appreciate that.
I'm going to go over all of them just scroll and make sure they're right. But I figure if two people are doing the exact same thing, you're probably going to do the exact same thing.
That's our hope. That's our hope. I think what we'll do is for people that are low on participation points in the semester, for clicker points, we'll also, after this thing is done, we'll make it possible that you can do another commodity for, 4 or 5 clicker points. So if you want to get caught up, it will help us get this thing published faster, and it will show that you're interested in this topic anyways. Arthur?
So if I got that right, the extra credit homework, that's just take the year you have, just use that one equation and just plug it back in?
Yeah, so what we're looking for, let me take you the link. What we'd like is not just the number, but we'd like you to actually copy and paste a table of the countries, their market fraction, and then the number of HHI. So here this shows everyone's student ID number. So you'll look through here and find wherever your student ID number is. I ranked them, so they should be in numeric order. That should make it easier to find your number. There's 2 columns, right? There's one student who's going to do nitrogen at 1998 right here. Another student's going to do nitrogen at 1998 as well. So we want to see that you got the same answer. So if you're both assigned that, you can go ahead and paste your things in here, do the 2 students, right? We want to see that you've got basically the same thing. Brennan, you want to add on to this?
Yeah, I've actually got an example of those things.
Do you want to come up, show it?
Yeah.
This is probably a good use of our time, actually. See, while he's getting that ready, let's move on to our next clicker question. We good to move on to clicker question number 2? Okay, our next one says the following.
One of these 2 questions has
Okay, yeah, people got that one right.
older version, but it's got some of the things on it. So.
Okay. Actually, I've got to wait till this is done and then do it. So give me just 1 minute. So this next question says, why is Ford replacing, misspelled, steel with aluminum in their trucks? Is it A, due to its lower density, B, due to its being shinier and more corrosion resistant, C, it's more heat resistant, or D, because it is easier to spot weld? if you even looked at the title of this article, I hope you get it right. Okay, answers in on this one. Okay, we're gonna wrap this up. Okay, definitely do the lower density. Those other things are true, some of them. Like the being corrosion resistant is true. These two are not as true, the other two. Okay, then last one for the reading quiz question is, almost all materials can be recycled profitably, true or false? By profitably, this is just the economic profitable. We're not looking big picture here. This is the greedy businessman definition. Okay, it looks like answers are in. Okay. Definitely false. Okay, let's talk really quickly about how we're going to make these calculations. You want to bring that up, Brennan? Okay, Brennan, we're ready for you.
Let's see if I can figure out which one of these flash drives is it. It's on one of them. Come on. Come on, flash drive. There we go. Let's see. Let's see, where's my 1998 data? Okay, yeah, this is a really old one, but here's the general thing that I got. All right, so I'm gonna try to explain this. So here we have the spreadsheet that I'm working on. So as you can see, I've got over here element because I'm doing a bunch of different elements. You guys don't have to worry about that. But the most important things are you guys need country, production, ignore reserves, market share, and then total HHI. And so HHI comes from taking all these individual contributions here and just summing them up, right? And it's important that we have countries because the project is built around seeing events for countries and how that affects market shares. So just straight up copy paste it off the Excel tables.
So for production and market share, do we just Google that?
No, they're in the tables. The values in the world production tables are the values you're going to be using in these.
So if people haven't watched the YouTube video, Brennan carefully goes through, it's about 13-minute long, the video. Watch that first, and he goes all the way through how to do it on one example, and you're literally going to do the exact same thing, but for a different commodity at a different year than what he chose. So it's easy, but it's tedious work, so we're happy to have people help contribute on this, and it means getting some extra credit, and everyone's winning. Okay? Other questions on this I can answer right now? So again, what you're going to do, you're going to go to this first tab in this Google spreadsheet. You'll find your number, find the element, find the commodity, year, and then you just go right here to the URL. That'll take you right to where these things are stored. And then if there's additional notes like which table to use, he's provided notes on which table to take the data from. And if you have any questions at all, then I've posted an announcement with Brendan's email, and you can ask him about it in detail or email me. Either way is fine. Okay. I did your U email. Does that work? Okay. Okay, let's now, so today will be a different class than normal. Normally it's like a bunch of facts coming like from teacher to student, right? And I don't love that model, but that's what we've been doing so far. Today we're going to do something different. We've all done the reading, and what I want is to hear mostly from you guys. I'm just going to moderate the discussion, right? So we have at least 3 different topics and a possible 4th. The 3 that we're going to start with, one is the horseshoe crab blood farming, one is on aluminum trucks, and then the Dutch farming, right? Those 3 we can cover, and if we have time, we'll get into rooftop solar. For each one of these topics, if we're talking about sustainability, then we need to consider 3 different things. We need to consider the economic impact, the ecological impact and the societal impact, right? So let's start with the horseshoe blood article. And I want you to, with the people nearby you, first for just a moment, try and sketch down on a piece of paper. Kyle, you're out of luck, man. You got to find somebody to work with, right? But I want you to sketch down what are key topics on each of these things, either pro or con, right? You don't have to argue one way or the other. We'll split that up in a minute, but just write down things that are relevant to ecological, economic, and societal impacts. So let's start with horseshoe crab. right, economic, ecological, or societal. What are some of the impacts you guys came up with? What do you got? Elise.
So we talked about how only 4 companies are in charge of producing the blood.
Yeah, they're the ones that farm it.
Yeah, so it can get pretty expensive.
Yeah, what's the number? Was it like 1,500 or 1,000?
50,000 a quart. Yeah.
A quart? Just bonkers. Right? That's just crazy numbers. All right, what else? So clearly there's an economic incentive to doing this. Like if you wanted to get in the game, you'd be like, hey, I'd love to be one of these 4 fishing companies. If that was your only consideration, this magical elixir that you can just pull out of the ocean, out of this grubby crab, it's delightful. Let's do it. Right? What else? Can you force breed them? You know, the article doesn't talk about that. Does it? I don't think it talks about that. No. I'm very curious about that myself. I'd imagine if it was easy, they'd be doing it because this does have such value. So I'm guessing it's not that easy to do, but I don't know. What else? Stinking pandas, man. Yeah. Haley.
Because we're interfering with their breeding pattern, it's decreasing the amount that they are using.
Right.
Showing more because they're like, I've been used.
Yeah, I mean, the article is great. It's like, we like to think of horseshoe crabs like we take its blood just a little bit, 30%, right? And it's like, what they say, it's like it gets like a juice and an animal cracker and it's on its way and it's happy. Well, like, turns out when you drain 30% of the blood out of something, it's not working right afterwards. So some of them like did circles, some of them were weak and they didn't make it into the breeding grounds. So we're seeing a decline in their population, right? So that's certainly an ecological impact. That's a negative one. I think I saw Jeff Sand first.
I don't think you mentioned explicitly on the ecological side, but I got the impression that they were protecting things for this reason, that break that you can't, you can't catch them.
This article is 2 years old. Yeah, 14, so 3 years old. And at that time, there was just a fishing regulation coming out, basically, that was going to start affecting them. I'm sure it's in place by now. So yeah, protected and regulations, which that is going to be tied into economic, right? If there's like regulations on how much you can pull out, that's going to affect that. Regulations over there. That's societal because why? Because that's people's jobs, right? What about the people that do this? That's their jobs. So the fact that they have a job is great, but the fact that it could be limited is not great. What else? There's more to this. Yeah, Morgan?
They talked about at the end that it might be better for horseshoe crabs to continue to be bled because if they're not going to become useless or like not worth anything, they're going to start being used for bait for food.
Yeah, what do we call this? Let's just write catch 22 because good to be worth something, right? Because if you're not worth anything, you go back to what they were used for, which I think you said fertilizer. Oh, or bait and fertilizer. They'd grind them up and just like grow potatoes and stuff with them. This poor animal, dude. All right, what else? Jeff.
Societally speaking, the reason that we're willing to drain 30% of these animals' blood every year is because they're saving millions. I'm guessing millions of lives. I mean, this is a species that has saved more human lives than probably yes.
I just can't think of any other article I've read in recent history that was as surprising to me that this grubby animal that lives at the bottom of the ocean, it looks like a dinosaur. It's just horrifying looking. These things seriously look like something out of like Alien. First off, that its blood is literally used to determine whether or not pathogens exist in all of our medical devices. That it can do that and that we use that is just mind-boggling. So all of us have had vaccines, many of them. All of us have probably had a surgery or at least some sort of medical device that came in contact with our blood. If that had strep, or something like MRSA or something on it, that can kill people, right? And by exposing that device or that vaccine to this blood, that blood will cause it to form a gel, and therefore they know that is a bad batch, that it's not sterile. That's amazing to me that this is what they use. So they call it the LIL test. The crab's name is, what is it? Limulus polyphemus. And so the LAL test is Limulus amoebocyte lysate. That's this test that has to be run on basically every single biomedical device. So clearly saving millions or billions of lives is a massive economical or societal plus, right? That has economical implications too, right? Brennan?
Societally, the reason why we started regulating it is that people suddenly became aware that while we are using it to save millions, if we use all of them up in the process, it won't be there in the future to help save more people's future.
Yeah, like this is absolutely like we could farm it to extinction. We've done that with plenty of things on this planet, right? Rob?
Kind of adding on the societal thing, just another detail, which is just super cool. Detects pathogens in what, like nothing else even comes close. 1 part per trillion. Nothing else can even touch that.
That's absolutely nuts that it can do this. But what's amazing is that evolution made that possible, right? It talks about it. It's like this animal is not like humans. It's got this shell with like big openings, so like bacteria is gonna get in there. Like the way that our immune system works wouldn't work under the ocean in this really bacteria-filled, swampy place. And so they had to have something else. And so evolution created this amazing gift that we are now utilizing. Okay, anything else that we need to talk about from this article? Haley?
Well, I think, okay, so this is a negative effect of it, and it ties in societal and ecological. I think how we just take a creature and we treat it as just a resource instead of like giving it intrinsic value, it just adds to the list of like why humans can consume whatever they want, dispose whatever they want, so therefore we're not taking care of this circle of life. So we're really screwing ourselves over by.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Using it as if it's like digging copper out of the ground, right? And use it what you will. I agree that there's a mentality there that I think absolutely affects us as a society. Clearly has economic and ecological ones. What else? Anything? Anything else? Did we cover everything there? Okay, so we talked about how bleeding them is not great for them, that a number of them die. We talked about the cost. Talked about what they do, that they're not spawning, that's a problem because of it. Oh, so I thought it was interesting. Like this led me to do some research. It said, after all, it's not like we still get insulin from for diabetics from pigs. So they did this with pigs too, right? They used to actually literally take out of their organs, kidneys and pancreas and whatnot. They would take the insulin out of them, and they'd take, ready for this, 2 tons of pig parts, they called it, to make 8 ounces of insulin. 2 tons, like 2 cars basically, to get half a can of soda basically of insulin. That's pretty wild. I did the math, that's 125 parts per million. So we don't have to do that anymore because we came up with a clever way to make yeast create these things for us, right? We're harnessing microbiology to make them create that same insulin for us so you don't have to grind up pig parts. Yep.
They used to do the same thing with horses. They'd have a snake fight to kill the horses, and the horse's blood reacts in a way that creates vaccine. So you can get, it was a cheap
fascinating.
Vaccine.
Microbiology is mind-boggling. So then you could use that as a snake antivenom, you're saying? Oh, that's wild.
They don't do that anymore because horses are pretty.
So that's the same thing here. It's like they do mention that there are 2 companies. One is a German company, Hyglos, and the other one is what company? Singapore company. They now have things that behave in the same way that this chemical does. The chemical, by the way, was what, coagulogen or something? Yeah. Coagulogen. They now have 2 synthetic versions which are coming online. Sounds like they're not quite available yet. This is 3 years old, so I hope that they're available now. But that's something that you could talk about. So if you're in the business economic of this, you have to think about competitors, right? Competitors and synthetic brands, right? That's basically what they're up against. Okay, we could probably go on. I'm sure that we could keep getting more out of this. I thought this was a fascinating article because it shows how one process, you can't decouple it from all these things, right? And there's pros and cons for this. And given more time, maybe at the end of class, if we do have time, we'll split it in half and we'll have you argue pro or con. Should we keep doing this as is? Should we stop doing it altogether? Should we meet in the middle somewhere? Before we do that, let's switch to aluminum trucks. The same exercise as before. I'll start going around this way. I want you to think of what are the economic, ecological, and societal impact of replacing steel in our aluminum, or in our trucks with aluminum. Okay. These, but before we begin, not a shameless plug, but I'm going to say that right now in the United States, when you think of big trucks, there's a show on Discovery Channel. This guy's actually my little brother. They build trucks that are like 10 to 20,000 pounds, some of them, just monsters, right? I'll post a link to it if you want. Trucks, yeah. I mean, they build these just monstrous trucks, kind of just for the sake of building monstrous trucks. And I mean, so that's sort of the mentality. It's like bigger is better. Like this is just like, why not? And so this article represents a pretty big change from that, a pretty big departure, because now they're saying massively lighter, right? Trying to shave off every pound you can on these things. So why do we do it? Why? What are the impacts of making aluminum versus steel trucks? Kyle?
You get like better like gas mileage. It's lighter, so you can tow more gas, like packages and stuff.
Yeah, lighter means better towing capacity. Yep. These things do have, I can't remember the numbers offhand, they got it here.
It's 11% more.
20% or something.
20% better gas mileage.
Yeah, 20% fuel efficient and 11% heavier loads. That's a big deal. That's a very, very big deal. Okay, other things. Yeah, Rob?
So it says that aluminum is, a third as dense, but like 2.5 times more crash resistant, so like in total.
Oh, it is crash resistant. We were talking about that back there. So yeah, it is more crash resistant then. So let's put that under societal.
But that's pound for pound, so the thing about that is if you use the same amount of material, it would be a little bit less.
Okay.
Because it's the density issue.
There's clearly going to be a question though. Is it going to make it better or worse in terms of crashes? Is certainly something, as you're replacing aluminum, you're going to have to consider. Yeah, Nick.
Like aluminum is more ductile than steel, but something that we talked about was they're having issues with welding it. So like the joints of the chassis might be weaker with aluminum than steel. So if there was a wreck, depending on how the forces hit the truck, like the joints might break easier and the truck might fall apart in collision or something. Perhaps.
Yeah, this was something I had no idea of, but apparently, yeah, welding these things is a nightmare hard. I'm not a big welder, and the few times I have, it's not been aluminum. And the big problem is because some aluminum alloys, well, a lot of them melt even before they even start to glow. And so you don't know if you're even hot yet. All of a sudden, you just melt this thing, right? That's one of the challenges. John.
So like when we first came out with this brand, a lot of trucks were being told
on the spot because they get a dent and frame shops have no idea how to fix them, or if they repair something, would that hold up like a crack? I think there's still issues with that.
Yeah, they talk about the end of this article. It talks about what's going to happen to insurance rates, which affects consumers, right? That's an economic rate. Because now your body shop that you go to take this thing to get it fixed, they have to have a laser welder. You can do it with careful arc welding, they said, but laser welding is really the best practice here. And your mom and pop repair shop's not going to have that capability. So they either have to adapt societal impact, right? Or not do it anymore, societal impact, or send it to a specialist, which is going to cost you more. So these things are definitely interrelated. Yeah. Remind me your name? Dan.
Why do most people need a truck period?
Hey, I think this is a great question we should ask. Like, I've not asked him that. Okay, other questions, Elise.
We were speaking of parts before, but so with aluminum parts, we wouldn't have to replace them as often because they don't really rust.
Oh yeah, so yeah, the corrosion resistance is actually that's great in terms of economic.
But on the flip side, since they don't rust, we would have to find some system to recycle this.
Or what about the people that apply the corrosion resistant coating? Right, there's probably some sort of impact there. Another hand over here. Remember your name? Nate?
Nate. It's a lot easier to recycle.
Yeah.
Or beneficial.
Easier to recycle, for sure. Other comments? Kyle?
JB, like the aluminum trucks, though, is kind of relevant to like what you're trying to use it for. Like more consumers, it weighs aluminum would make more sense. But if you're like commercial, it makes more sense to have like steel beds, like new trucks, because like the aluminum gets more, so you have to like pay to get those replaced, and like the amount of stuff that they're moving around, you don't want to have to replace your truck every year because your bed's all jacked up.
Yeah, so taking into account the end use and the consumer and what their requirements may differ in terms, or resources, how they may differ, is probably important to consider. Jeff?
Looking at it like one of the biggest problems with trucks is we were talking about how, one of the problems with owning a truck is you have terrible gas mileage, so you're wasting money on gas. And everybody wants to have a truck, they want to be man, they want to be cool, they want a big car.
We all want to be this guy?
Yeah, exactly.
Way to go.
But if we're making these out of aluminum, then it's way more affordable, and more people will be able to join that fantasy around us. I don't want to offend anybody who likes trucks. I'm sorry, but I mean, have the power fantasy. Like, I'm cool. I've got a huge car, and without having to pay so much.
Yeah. Something we haven't mentioned over here, it probably belongs in in economic and ecological, is the CAFE standards. CAFE, what's it stand for again? It's consumer. What is it? Corporate Average Fuel Economy. So this is coming from legislation, right? Congressmen, senators, the president, these people decide that there's probably some rules that we should set. If you're going to sell vehicles in this country, you have to hit minimum CAFE standards, which have to do with fuel efficiency. This probably makes sense. If you're going to sell cars, you should probably say, hey, we want the average fuel efficiency to get a little bit better every year. And we probably don't want to sell cars that are terribly fuel insufficient because we don't have endless fuel and there's a lot of byproducts, right? So we could go on. 15 minutes left. Let's skip Dutch farming. We've already talked about it just a little bit. And instead, let's talk about rooftop solar. You didn't read an article about this. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to split the class roughly in half. So if you're on this side, I want you... well, first, let me set the stage. So this is going to argue in favor of net metering as it was. This half of the class is going to argue for net metering as it's just been adjusted to. Here's setting the stage for you. Increasingly in Utah and everywhere, more and more rooftop solar is becoming available, right? Good or bad, doesn't matter. I'll be impartial here. You guys can decide. Now, you're going to argue for and against it. The challenge that's come up and what legislators had to decide, right? The politicians actually had to settle this one out, is whether or not the power company, Rocky Mountain, can change their net metering agreement. The net metering agreement before said if you produce power, we'll basically act as your battery for you. So we'll host your power when you're not producing, and you can sell it back to us if you will. That was the old agreement, that for a low cost at the grid, which the politicians allowed you to build in the first place, they would let you store your power on the grid, right? Rocky Mountain Power says we want to actually change that model. We don't want to hold your power for free. We want to start charging you for it, right? So I'm going to leave it up to you guys to to come up with the arguments for and or against this, and we're going to have a debate back and forth on this. So take a minute and discuss with people near you what might be some of the arguments for or against the change in net metering. So again, the change is, should we make people who want rooftop solar pay an additional premium to store that power, or should we not?
Can you tell us those things again?
So over here, you're arguing that you want to make consumers pay extra if they're going to get rooftop solar. Over here, you're going to say, no, rooftop solar shouldn't have to pay extra. They should be paid what everyone else pays. If they're not using the grid, they shouldn't pay for it very much. Things like this. Minutes. So instead of listing out the economic, ecological, societal, let's pick a few champions, right, from each side. And I want to hear your best argument for and against. So we will do one for or against, right? Let's start with for, right? So who wants to argue for? Why should we, if you've installed rooftop solar, why should you not have to pay more? Why should you keep the net metering change as it was, or the net metering agreement as it was? Any thoughts? Anybody? John's feeling brave. I can tell. No, Rob's got something.
I don't want to be that guy. You'll be that guy. Yeah, I'll be that guy. If no one else is going to be that guy. Because you shouldn't be incentivized to not go solar.
Okay. So basically, there's an ecological argument to going solar, right? And so you shouldn't be penalized for trying to do that. Yeah. Okay. Other arguments?
Also.
For, or if there's a rebuttal, we can also do that in the back.
So what about the people who already bought solar thinking that it will be an investment, but then they get the extra charge afterwards?
That's a great point, and I didn't mention that when I set this up, but there is a grandfather clause where if you did it before November 15th of this year, 7 days ago, you're in the old one, right? So you only had to pay some small fee each month instead of a large fee. Okay, other arguments for or against, Ali?
When you introduce energy into the grid, you you're actually powering other houses or whatever, so you're making it cheaper for the company.
That's a great argument. He's saying, hey, don't charge me because you're using my excess power, and I assume you're going to use that and it's going to help other people. Is there a counter argument to that? What over here, Ryan?
Rockbound, they also produce solar power, and it's cheaper for them to produce it themselves than to have individual homes set up solar.
Yeah.
Wire them to the grid.
I've listened to this debate, and I'm really in the middle. I promise I'm right in the middle on this one. I think that's the most compelling argument that this side of the room has, is basically like, hey, we care about solar energy too, and if you put it on your roof, it's not as efficient or cost effective as if we put it in a big farm and you buy it from us from the farm. Then you use the grid, you pay for the grid like normal, but you're doing solar. It's a pretty compelling argument. Somebody got a counter argument? John.
I can argue against. I can argue for the increase.
Okay, for the rate increase.
So the way Rocky Mountain Power used to operate is they had a gas generator that adapted to the needs of society. Like around noon, it was pretty low because everyone was at work.
Yeah, we should remind people, what does power look like? Power consumption look like? If this is time, like in the day, so this is like morning and night, power consumption basically is bimodal, is the thought. In the real world, it's actually not quite as bimodal as that, but in the morning and night is still, generally speaking, when we use most of our power.
So they used to like ramp this generator up as society needed it. Like it'd be low around noon, everybody got home around 5, hopped on Netflix, put the heater on, and ramped it up. They can't do that so much anymore because the solar power at noon is like, that's when the solar is putting so much back into the grid.
Right, the red line being solar here.
As much at noon, they have to produce a ton when the sun was down still. And they can't ramp up their generator. They're actually operating at a higher percent now.
That's exactly what they do. So instead of, John hit that exactly right on the head, instead of saying like, oh, hey, great, like Ali was saying, like in the middle of the day when people are producing solar, we don't have to run our generators. We'll just use your electricity for that. Instead, what they really have to do is they have to produce power like that, like really high at all times, and then they dump the excess power into heat, basically. So that's their argument against it. It's like, hey, your power is not helping us because it's not coming at the right time of day. So it's just making us run at a higher amount. Right? Other arguments for or against that we haven't talked about? Yeah.
They're not really producing as much solar as they are with the non-renewable energy sources.
Oh yeah.
So the more people invest in solar, the cheaper it's going to be, and the better the efficiency.
Yeah, no one has come out right out really and said like there's an ecological advantage to doing this, right? That we don't want the dirty air. That could come in. But I think maybe what you're saying is that the more people do this, it will become more economical and become something that could displace a dirtier technology. I think no one's in disagreement that it's a dirty technology. It's just a matter of nickels and dimes, like how do we want to transition? And if it's expensive, the argument is if somebody is wealthy enough that they can put solar panels on their home, why should the poor people that aren't wealthy enough subsidize that? That's Rocky Mountain Power's argument. Yeah, Takar?
I was just going to continue on with kind of what you drew there. The biggest reason we can't just plug in power to the grid is because there's no current efficient way to store the electricity, right?
Well, there is. It's expensive. Yeah, from the grid, you mean? Oh, grid level storage, yeah. And you listen to people like Elon Musk, and he's like, yeah, we use power walls. Like, in practice, we don't do it. Storing energy is very expensive. One of the cheapest ways to store it, what's the cheapest way to store energy? Not rotational, that's a good guess. Somebody say it? Hydro. They pump hydro. Basically, with the electricity that you produce during off hours, in the middle of the day when no one's using it, you pump water up into giant towers or up into reservoirs, and then later in the day when you want it to come down, you let that water run and run turbines. So that's one way that they do load leveling, is using dams, but that works in places that have dams. Otherwise, you use water towers, and that has limited capacity. Right? So batteries, we'd like to use them. They're just way more expensive than pumped hydro. Ryan? Or Zach, sorry.
Yeah, it's probably a really unpopular opinion, but I think solar's kind of snake oil because you're really just trading one commodity for another. Like you're mining all sorts of silicon in big open pit mines, somewhere else, not in the U.S. or maybe here, and you're trading that for maybe drilling one hole and just siphoning natural gas out of it.
It's a really good argument, right? I've heard people talk about that. Not only that, but also like the waste associated with making solar panels. When you refine silicon, there's a lot of chemical waste. There's a lot of other precursors. So sustainability would say, let's look at the entire life cycle, what's produced, what's consumed. And that's, maybe an argument there. John?
Like, he's not wrong. Like, they did an analysis with Prius when it first came out. Its green footprint was terrible. Like, just mining everything that batteries needed was awful. But
yeah.
They, for refined production process, owning a Prius is better than owning a Ford F-150 with an aluminum frame.
Yeah. Dang, we are out of time. This day always goes by too fast. Great discussion. If you have more to say about this and you didn't get a chance to, I'm going to start an announcement thread or a discussion thread. If you want to put other ideas up there, we're happy to listen to them.